100% natural.
The 100.
100. 100.
Do 100.
100.
About 100.
100.
100. 100.
100.
Sound matters. Be heard. Welcome to the podcast where you get exclusive behind-the-scenes tips to make your own show sound truly spectacular. This is Podtastic Audio.
Hey, what's happening? How are you doing today? How is your podcast coming along? I am Chris, and I am from the original Chris and Christine Show podcast. You can find out every single thing you want to know about that show on over at that website, which I have created at chrisandchristineshow.com, and this is episode 100. As you can tell from the clever intro I put together for this podcast episode, it has been a great, incredible ride creating this podcast to help you create your podcast. In fact, the only reason I started the show was just to help out others create a better podcast. You see, back on the Chris and Christine Show, we started that show, I think it was summer of 2019. So just before March of 2020. You see where I'm going here? So in March of 2020, everything got shut down due to COVID and the lockdowns and all that fun, well, not so much fun stuff for most people. And in 2020, March, April, we saw a big surge of podcasting just explode and hit the market. So we've been podcasting, for maybe 6 months or so up to that point. And through trial and error, figuring out what worked for us and what didn't work for us, and having guests and how to make them sound great and what tools to use and what software to use. And we did not have a lot of money invested into the podcast at that time. And we really still don't now I think about it. I mean, I'm using a Rodecaster Pro 2 today, but when we just started the podcast back in the summer of 2019, we just had two very cheap and very basic USB microphones. And we got it up, we got it rolling, and we were having so much fun doing that. And I said, there's got to be an easier way to create the podcast and make it sound a little better in the long run. Because if you can make it work for you and make it very easy to create a podcast and make it sound great, and you're having fun, well, then that's a win-win. So back around the early 2020, when everybody was podcasting and trying to make a podcast, I was getting a lot of DMs and messages and emails, probably 5, 6, or 10 from different podcasts that came to me asking me, well, how do you make your show sound so good? What are you doing? Why does your show sound amazing? Do you have a studio? Do you have a big radio station production booth that you're creating the podcast in? Do you have that stuff? And I said, no, I don't. I have basic gear. I probably have the same gear you're using right now. In fact, you're probably even using better gear than I'm using. So what's the problem? Why does your show sound like crap and my show sounds good? And then it got me thinking, well, I don't know how to help all these people because they keep asking me for advice. So it got me thinking, well, what if I start another podcast? And I know starting 2 podcasts can be difficult because you're trying to focus on the one podcast you already have and to start a second podcast. But then I'm like, you know what? If I just start another podcast, I'll put up on Anchor, because everybody and their mother who starts a podcast in 2020 seems like they all gravitate towards using Anchor. I think now it's called Spotify podcasting or some goofy name. I don't know. But anyways, I'll put it over there and I'll just do a show every week or so. Just kind of throw something out there, a little tip, a little information, just something to kind of help you, create a better podcast. And on episode 1, I was kind of fumbling around and I got the episode rolling and somebody heard it and they told me, I think you gave away all your information. You gave away all your best stuff in the first episode. What are you going to talk about now? And I'm thinking, trust me, there's always something to talk about when it comes to podcasting. There's lots of new shows that come to the market. There's lots of people that ask me questions on how to create a better sounding podcast, which microphone to use, mic techniques, editing techniques, recording guest techniques, all that stuff. And I knew that at the beginning, I think I had probably 5 to 7 episodes, maybe kind of mapped out on what I wanted to talk about on Podtastic Audio here. And once I got through those, I started bringing on different people to talk about their podcast, like podcasting, different podcasters. We come on, we talk shop, we'll talk about their show. And I believe early on, I even played a few games with these guests. I would have like movie trivia clips on the podcast. I would play them live thanks to Clean Feed Pro account I have. Play them live and they would guess what movie it was from. We had a fun blast doing that. And the show has eventually evolved since then. Here I am talking about podcasting, helping you podcast. And now that we are at episode 100, it's kind of crazy to think that this show I'm on right now has kind of surpassed the Chris and Christine show as far as like listens and plays go. This show is really kind of blown up. And I want to say thank you so much for listening and allowing me to help you create an amazing podcast, because this is what this show is all about. I don't do this for fame. I don't do this to be, rich or anything like that. I just do this show because people are asking me for help. And I was like, well, why don't I make another podcast to help you out? And that's exactly what the show is all about. So being that it is my big 100 episode here at Podtastic Audio, I am going to invite a special VIP guest to come onto the show. A while ago, I transitioned from working with Anchor. Now I host this podcast on Libsyn. Now, if you're not familiar with Libsyn is probably one of the biggest or the biggest podcast media host in the business. They've been around a very long time. I think probably since the very early days of podcasting. They were one of the first hosts to come to the market. And they have got a crew over there of people that help other podcasters out. I call them the Libsyn Dream Team. And basically, if you follow them on social media, you follow Libsyn on any of the social media accounts, there's about 4 or 5 of these guys and gal, should say, LC shout out, that are on there to give you advice and tips and tricks about podcasting. And one of them is none other than Brian Cottington from Libsyn. He works on their video department, creating videos and tutorials on how to make a better podcast and software tricks and editing tricks and microphone tricks. And being that it is the big 100 over here in Podtastic, I said, Brian, why don't you come on over, stop on by, get the private jet, fly you on in over here, and we'll talk all about podcasting. So please enjoy my conversation with Brian Cottington.
I'm doing good. Thank you for having me on the show. Been looking forward to this since you contacted me.
Oh, I know, man. You are part of the Libsyn Dream Team on over there. I noticed.
Apparently I am.
Yeah, and today, being that it is the 100th episode here at Podtastic Audio, big 100, I saved it just for you, Brian.
I'm blown away by that. One, you call me a part of the Libsyn Dream Team, which I still don't know if I fit that, because that's an honor right there. And on top of that, to be your 100th guest, blown away.
Well,
just blown away.
It's way podcasting works sometimes. How sometimes your 100th episode could be nothing, or it could be something special, like having you over here. So being that you work for Libsyn,
yeah,
which is a podcast media host, probably some would say the biggest or one of the biggest ones on the block. Yeah. How did you land a job over there at Libsyn?
So it's one of those things that it's not a linear story. Like, I didn't apply to be at Libsyn. What had happened was I'd worked for about 9 years at a university in Pittsburgh called Chatham University. And I was doing events media, and that's because my background's in film and video, and that's kind of one of the jobs you get is like doing events. And so I had done that for about 9 years, was getting kind of burnt out. Then the pandemic happened. And like most people, or at least a lot of people that I've met, they kind of reassess their priorities, with the pandemic. And so I had kind of dove into doing another thing that I was passionate about, which is teaching. So I had done adjunct teaching for about a year, and I'd say a year and a half. And I had at this time had a podcast. I was a customer of Libsyn's, been a customer of theirs since 2016. And literally out of the blue, I got a call from a recruiter who was working with Libsyn, and they were telling me about this company. Like, oh yeah, it's a startup kind of culture. It's all in podcasting. They do that. I'm like, what's the name of it? Oh, it's called Libsyn. I said, oh, well, I know all about them because I've been a customer of theirs for a long time. And it just was a perfect fit, and what they were looking for was exactly what I do, working in video and helping them build out their brand on YouTube specifically. And it just was a perfect match, and it's been awesome.
Nice. So when they actually did the interview, was it via like Zoom or something?
It was pretty much via like a Zoom or Google Meet, and we had a couple back and forth interviews, and then they just offered it to me.
Nice.
Yeah.
So what is your exact job title over there, Libsyn?
So my exact job title is video designer and editor. So basically what I do is help to communicate the needs of the company across all three of our well, actually four if you count Glow. But Libsyn actually is a company that's made up of Libsyn, AdvertiseCast, Glow.fm, and Pair Networks. So I do all the video work for those companies. That's part of our brand. And am responsible also for helping to execute a lot of our video asks on YouTube, but also creating a lot of the shorts and reels that you see on Instagram and YouTube Shorts and things like that.
Nice. So to create all those video components to Libsyn, do you have to have like super like high powered computer? What are you running to do all that stuff?
So I'm running a MacBook M1.
Okay,
M1
that's what I have
Pro.
too.
Yeah,
I have the M1 Pro. Are you thinking about maybe going to the M2?
I mean, I haven't. This is the one I got from the company, and when I got hired on. So like, I love this thing right now. It's a beast, and it's crazy that it's a little like form factor of a laptop. But like in my other work I've done, I use an HP Omen 15 for a lot of personal film work that I do, which is a nice little gaming computer. I'm personally a fan of AMD stuff, just because I like the power you get out of them.
Okay, but you can get the same power out of an M1?
Yeah, I mean, the M1, I get a lot of power from programs that I use it with, because with the M1, obviously a lot of the companies, like I use a lot of Adobe products, and it was a slow process to get them kind of to accepting the M1, but now it's the point now where a lot of the software I use is pretty much set up to support the M1. So they kind of work in tandem a lot better.
Nice. Yeah, I was thinking about upgrading when I just found out that the Mac Mini just came out with the M2. Yeah. And I'm like, oh, maybe I should get one of those, because I'm going to be using my MacBook Pro I bought a few years ago with the M1 when it first came out. And the thing is that thing powers everything. And I'm thinking like, well, that thing goes down. what am I going to do? I mean, I haven't knock on wood, but I was kind of thinking maybe I should get a backup computer, because they're not very much. Like you can get an M2 basic M2, for $500-$600. Which is pretty. I was at Costco the other day, and I noticed that they were clearing out the MacBook Airs with the M1s for like $700.
For audio work, I'd say those are good.
Yeah,
for audio work, those are good. For video work, I would be careful, just because like I teach film and video still. So that's like my other job. Not part of Libsyn. I actually do that like on a university level. And the universities I've worked for have given out like the MacBook Pros, and not MacBook Pros, but the MacBook Airs. And even with those like M1, M2 chips, even those things struggle at some things that I teach. Like I teach After Effects and motion graphics. So like, students will like be running something, and you'll hear the laptop start like making noise. Like the fans kick on, and you're just like, that's not good. So like it all goes back to what are you doing with it? Like if you're doing audio work is honestly, any computer you get can pretty much do the audio work.
Well, unless you run a lot of effects, I noticed, because I started. Well,
yeah.
If I started
real-time stuff.
I'm running a lot of real-time effects when I do podcast editing and stuff. Like I just did my client show the other day, and I had 4 different people on the show running 4 or 5 different effects on each track, multi-track recording. And I think it took a good maybe 2.5 minutes to process that into one single audio track, a finished track, where if I wasn't using any effects, I think it would take 10 seconds.
I would say, what's the RAM working on your computer though?
I only have 8 gig. I have the basic.
So that's the thing is you could take that computer and you could max out the RAM and you would already get better performance out of it. And RAM's cheap.
Well, not for the M1. You can't even upgrade the RAM in those things. They are built into the chip.
That's evil.
It is. When the guy told me that at the store, because I went from a 12 gigabyte RAM computer to an 8, I'm thinking like going down. But don't worry about it. It's the M1. The M1 can handle all that stuff. An 8 gig with M1 is equivalent to like a 32 gig Windows computer. And I'm like, oh, okay, why not? So I've been using that, and that could possibly be why. I mean, it's working out. Because I don't do a ton of video work. I do a little light video work. Yeah. It's more the videos that I like to create are the family vacations, because we go on a big family vacation every year. And I take like GoPros. I've been a big founder of GoPro. I mean, I'm a big supporter of GoPro, I should say, since the early days of GoPro. Right. And I've gone through multiple GoPro cameras, and I think I'm buying a new one, speaking of which. But anyways, I take the GoPros and I take the family vacations with them, and then I'll take all that video and I'll try to splice that best I can to make one like family vacation, throw music and whatever. And it makes it easier for me to share that way, because I put it on YouTube and I realize, everybody can see it, but it makes it so much easier to share it on YouTube than it is to like try to send somebody a video file. Say, hey, watch this on your computer. Oh, I can't send it via email because the email caps out at 25 megs or whatever.
Something like that. Yeah.
So when it comes to podcasting itself, what are some best practices that you would say for somebody that wants to kind of get into podcasting for the first time, get started?
Yeah. So, first of all, anyone tells you need a lot of expensive equipment to start podcasting is wrong. I'll tell you that right off the bat. I got into podcasting mainly using equipment that I was borrowing from my day job, because I was doing events media. So I had access to microphones and things like that. And like I was the primary person. So I would use those microphones, recording my show. And if you don't have access to those, to be perfectly honest, you can use your phone.
Yeah, but it's the sound is good though.
It doesn't sound, but here's the thing though. Here's what I would say. The sound of your podcast is still secondary to your content. If you've got a really good show where you've nailed down your content and you've nailed down the story of your episode really well, and you've even got presence as a host, then the audio quality is secondary. Now, that isn't to say that's not important. I'll be the first to say that I obsess over those details, and that's just the way I am.
Yeah.
I'm someone who kind of like, whenever I do like an Instagram reel for myself or my own show, or a TikTok, I can't like just take my phone and just say, oh, I'm good with the phone's audio. It's like I have to get the whole gear together, record the thing, and like make it look good, because that's just the way I am. But for someone who's starting out, I really think it's more important to focus on what's the story of your episode? What is the content? Is it going to resonate with your audience? So do that first. Really do your research on your content. And that's free. It doesn't cost anything, Now, if you do that with the gear you got, I mean, even if you've got like your laptop computer, like whatever laptop you're using has a microphone, use that, Now, with that said, if you're working with just like your phone, you've got your laptop, then it becomes a matter of trying to problem solve for those things. So like for me, if I'm using my phone, I'm not going to go record my podcast in a restaurant. Right.
You want to eliminate background noise, I would think.
Right. You want to make it easier on yourself. So it's something that I was taught in film school, where we literally had to do an assignment where it was like, all right, imagine you don't have all the fancy lights and fancy gear, but you still need to tell a story. What do you do then? How do you solve for your limitations? So what I would do is, okay, what things can I control? Well, I mean, I've got my phone. I don't want a bunch of crazy background noise. So maybe I'll record in, say, my car. Right?
Yeah, I heard the car's pretty good.
Right, your car, or maybe you will record in, say, a closet. So it's really trying to solve for those things. Solve for the problems that your technology is giving you. All right. Now, after that, let's say you do this for a while. And that's really, I'd say, for someone who's just like, they want to dip their toe into it. Right. They want to dip their toe into podcasting. They're not sure. I wasn't that person, because I already had thought up what my show was going to be. well in advance. I knew what I was going to do. So I wasn't really dipping my toe in it. I kind of was like, I'm going to plunge. So it was a little bit different for me. But for someone who's like, I think I want to do podcasting, but I don't want to like, break the bank, and everyone's saying I need to buy this microphone and this, mixer and this thing, you don't need to worry about that. So once you get past that period, and I'd say that's your first like 5 episodes there, then maybe you invest in a decent mic. And when I mean decent, I mean like, a Shure MV7 or a Samsung Q2U, something that you can plug into your computer. Not saying using an interface, just USB straight in your computer. Dynamic microphone. There are a lot of them, relatively cheap. You can even find them on eBay. Like first microphone I really like got that was USB was an ATR 2100, and we used that for a long time. And then kind of slowly built our way up. So, gear wise, you kind of grow. Your show grows with your gear.
That's what I did. That's what I did over here. We started off with, I'm the kid you not, we started off with $20 Amazon specials and USB microphones. And they don't make those microphones anymore. They're from the company called Fifine. I don't know if you're familiar with them, but they make USB microphones. I don't think they have any XLR. They're all USB, I think. But anyways, they're pretty cheap microphones. They're talking like $50 or less kind of club. And we were using those. The thing I couldn't figure out at the beginning was that because our show originally always was a co-hosted show in the same room, and I had an old dinosaur, Windows PC, and I'm like, how do I get these both microphones plugging into USB slots? How do I get them both to record at the same time? And how do I do that?
It doesn't work.
It did because I tricked the computer.
Oh.
I did something on the Windows computer. It was like a stereo mix mode in the settings. Something I did where it took all the sound, like everything, and dumped it into one mono track on Audacity. Yeah. Okay, great. I got it. And we did the first like 20 episodes that way until I upgraded to an interface. Right. But before that's how I did it. And I think if you're going to just do a solo show, then maybe one USB is fine. But if you're trying to do multiple people in the same room, then you probably should figure something better out, like an interface, a Scarlett, Behringer, even a Rodecaster, even a Zoom PodTrack P4. I got one of those too. I love that thing, I
mean, here's the thing. If you're doing multiple people and you're all going to be in the same room, then for that, I would suggest getting some, just as you said, I get probably a recorder. Like I prior to going fully remote with my podcast, we were using the Tascam DR70D and 4 channels, XLR, battery operated, but also you can plug in. And that was our workhorse recorder. And I love that thing. I still use it whenever we're in person, on the rare occasion. But with that, it was now a matter of like, well, I need to buy some microphones for this. So I actually got, I think they are CAD, CAD mics, like these literally on stage, like, handheld dynamic microphones.
Like the ones for stand-up comedians who'd use.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. So I got a set of 3 of those, which are again, cheap. Right. And some XLR cables. And I think I got some stands, and that was maybe $150, if not less. So they're not the best mics, but like the way I looked at it, I was like, well, I'm getting about halfway there with this stuff. Right. And then, obviously can do some EQ in post and things like that.
Right.
But like, that's like, if you've got a 4-person podcast set up, that's really what I would suggest doing. Or if you're all remote, right. Then it becomes a matter of like, what piece of software you're going to use to capture everybody and get those independent channels. But like, I'm just thinking for like a person who's just starting out and like, they're not sure, maybe try to do remote, because it's a lot easier to do that. Even if like everybody's, coming in on not the best microphone, or even they're just using like a gaming headset, it's still better than nothing.
Well, what about the guys that take the Blue Yeti and put it on the dual mode and sit
No.
And they sit there and talk each side to it. I know.
My podcast did that one time.
Oh, how'd it go?
It was bad.
Really?
My co-host at the time, we were recording in person. She had a Yeti Pro. No, she didn't have a Yeti Pro. She just had it was a Yeti Pro, but didn't have the XLR. It only had USB. And for whatever reason, I think I forgot my mics that day, or like they weren't working or something like that. And so I'm like, all right, well, let's just like, turn on the polar pattern, right? And like put the mic in the center.
Yeah.
And I'll talk one side, you guys talk on the other. And it's not very good. And it's one of our early episodes. I don't even know which one it is. Right now there's 264 episodes of my show.
It's buried in the past. No one's going to find it.
It's buried in the past. Once I get to 300, I know that like Apple's going to like cap them.
Okay,
you won't see those anymore.
Right, yeah.
But like, yeah, like it was not good, and the room acoustics were terrible. So like, it's not a good episode.
Now, were you doing that like that? Was one of you guys actually listening to the audio live?
So I always plug in. So yeah, but it was one of those things that like, because the headphones I were using at the time, they were not the best headphones. Like they were not like stereo headphones or like even like, studio ones, anything like that. So I probably was like, well, I can't hear all the nasty echo stuff. And, I'm just hearing like their talking going into it and my talking going into it, but not any of those like things, because also it's like, what else am I going to do? Right. Like, that was my issue with it, but I would tell people don't do that.
So instead of spending $150 on one of those Blue Yetis, buy, 3 cheaper microphones, and everybody even handheld them, and then
even handheld them. I mean, in an optimal world, obviously you want to get your hands off the microphone, because the cheaper the microphone, the more
noise
you're going to catch out of them. But yeah, I mean those. Like a set of 3 stand mic, like on stage microphones, dynamic microphones, less sensitive. Those things can take a beating too. So if you're traveling with them,
nice.
Like that's the thing. Those things are designed to take a beating. So, you can drop them. You can do everything. I mean, I would never tell you to go out and purposely drop them, but just know like they're robust and they're not that crazy expensive. Obviously like, a Shure, I think it's SM58.
Yeah.
Like those are like the king microphone if you can get. They also, I think they're about $100 too for one. But like, as I said, like the Audio Technicas or the CADs, which was one we got, my co-host still uses them. When we do our recordings, that if you listen to it, he's using one of those CAD mics plugged into a Behringer, capture card.
Nice.
And you wouldn't tell the difference, So, I mean, it's just one of those things that, going back to kind of your first question, you grow with your show, your equipment grows with your show, but it still all comes down to, in my opinion, your content first. What is the story of your episode? And how are you telling that? And then the equipment will come. It will.
Yeah, but I've always looked from the standpoint of that, like if you have really poor audio, like it's like recorded at a level 2 and in the bathroom, and it matter how good your content is if it's unlistenable,
true,
then it's unlistenable.
True, and that's why I say if you are using, say, your phone or your laptop, then you have control over the environment you're in. So like I wouldn't record in a bathroom, or I wouldn't record in a restaurant. I wouldn't record in a location. And that's also something that just comes with experience too, right? Like I tell people this all the time, like listen to your episodes. I know a lot of podcasters are like, I'm tired of editing this thing. I don't want to listen to it, do an air check.
Right.
And it's like, you have to be the first person who listens to it. And then on top of that, like listen to it and analyze what's working, what's not working, not just from a content perspective, but also, as you said, from like that is the audio quality. And there have been times that I've been like, yeah, I don't like how I EQ'd that thing.
Yeah, totally.
So I'll go back in and change it,
Yeah, like I always listen to all my shows over again. I try to listen to it. I mean, it's hard to do, but I try to listen to it in the I guess the ears of a listener kind of perspective, kind of like, what are they
I listen
hearing?
to them in the car.
Like, I do too. Yeah, the car, the truck, on the phone too. I think the phone seems kind of hide some of the audio quality. I know my personal truck, I don't know, because it has a nicer system or what it has in it, I do start to hear things I didn't hear, like here on the computer or here on the phone. Maybe it's got a better system. I don't know. But I always try to make sure I listen back to them and kind of get the vibe of like, oh, what is a listener experiencing when they hear this episode? What does it sound like to them? Because really, you think about it, you're making the show for them to experience on the other end. I'm always thinking the end user And I think when it comes to doing video for your podcast, people seem to neglect the audio when they do the video that I've seen.
Absolutely.
Why is that?
Because there's a couple of reasons. Well, one, for the professional, for the person who's like, they're professional in video. Oftentimes you're taught video first and audio second. I went to 2 film schools, right? Got my bachelor's in TV video and got my master's in film. And audio was secondary to camera work. So that's something that because I do podcasting, obviously, I put audio kind of on the same plane as the camera work. But I think when people get into it, they're looking at it as like, oh, well, I need to get the lighting right. I need to get the camera right. And I need to get my set design right. And I need to get all this right. And then it becomes a matter of like, well, audio's secondary because I've exhausted all of my energy on the visual. And what I think people need to understand is that, especially for video podcasting, where you're doing long form content, it still comes down to audio connects on a deeper level than video will. When people listen to something, it's actually like an order of operations in your brain, right? Like it's easier for your brain to take in, audio data than visual data, right? So it's taking the audio data first and it's the visual second. So, for you to neglect that because you're caring more about like the camera and that you have to spend like, $5,000 on a camera or, X amount of dollars on these pro lights when your audio sounds like garbage, like that's not going to help you. That's going to hurt you, if anything. And then it's going to be called out. People will say like, well, why is your video great, but your audio is just terrible? Because people pay attention to that over bad camera work. When I do my videos for Libsyn, I'm using a Logitech C930.
That's a webcam?
Yeah, it's a webcam. Okay, C930. Now I know how to light the thing. Okay, but that's what I'm using. I'm not using a high-end DSLR. I'm using what I've got, and I make it work. So, like, I think that's the thing is most of you probably wouldn't even know that. For any of you who watch the videos I've done where I'm in the camera, you probably wouldn't have known that. For those of you who are like video pros, you probably would have seen some things like, he's using a webcam. But like the average person's not going to notice that. But if I were to use like, really, bargain basement audio or just use like my laptop mic, but I had like a high-end camera, the first thing that would come out of people's mouths is like, well, I'm not going to listen to this guy. His audio sounds terrible.
Right. Yeah. Right. Yeah. I mean, I'm kind of rigged up for video too. I don't really use it a ton. I only use it when people need me to be on their show via Zoom or whatever. Or I do a quick little videos. I do things like that. That's the only reason why I have this set up in here. And I actually had to get better lighting because the way the camera sits, it kind of sits back a little bit in this kind of darker area. So the camera, it's like a laptop. I mean, not laptop. I'd say webcam mic like you have.
Yeah.
But those things, I do think they do need some light to get right.
They need way more light than you would think.
You do, and I know that the one on the MacBook, maybe it's a better camera, maybe it's a Mac thing. I don't know. It does seem to be brighter on the camera lens when you pull up the camera on the Mac versus the camera on the webcam.
Yeah.
But like I said, I have 2 ring lights up in here.
Well, I stole Rob Greenlee's setup because when we did the studio tour, he was talking about his video setup, and I love his tree that he uses. He uses like a series of monitor arms. So like over Christmas, I was doing kind of like some buying of some gear, and I was like, I really need like a nice rig for this thing. So I basically bought all the things that he had. So I had LED panel lights already. They're like newer ones. They're very cheap. But I wanted to rig them up. So I have literally right now like a monitor arm system with the lights. I have extension for a tripod extension with the USB, with the USB, but the Logitech C930 mounted on it. So it's like always now mounted towards my face. And then on top of that, I bought, for anyone who's looking to do video stuff, and you've got like my sort of setup, if you go to Home Depot and you get LED smart bulbs, and mount them onto, say, like a mic stand or just anywhere onto like cam lights, like those like metal like construction lights, you can get a nice backlight. Nice colored backlight. And that's what I've been using. So like a couple videos that have been coming out recently, like they use like the colored background for me, and that's all using just a $30 light and some, a clamp light that maybe was like $2.
Nice. Look at that. DIY.
Yeah. I mean, that's the way you do it, man. Like that's, obviously like there are drawbacks to it. They're not nearly as bright as professional lights, but I mean, you wouldn't know the difference. And for me, it's just an accent. It's an accent light to just break up the background.
Nice. Yeah, I never even thought about that. Like I know that a lot of people like to use the stupid, the automatic background on their Zoom calls or whatever it is.
Yeah.
I'm not a fan of those because people move their head or anything. It kind of phases and it makes it look all weird looking. Like,
well, my thing too is like I'm bald, so like my head ends up blending in oftentimes.
Oh, it does.
Those. Yeah.
What a trip.
Yeah. If the light is too harsh on my head and the same as the background, my head will blend into like the blur out stuff. So I don't use those. I generally just like kick that light.
I said, be proud of your room. You know what I'm saying? Okay, it's a mess. We all have messy places. It's all good.
Oh,
man.
no one sees that. That's off to the side.
Oh, okay. You got out of the camera shot.
That's right.
You only put things in front of the camera you want the camera to see. I learned that from going to Universal Studios.
It's set design right there.
It is fantastic. So, Brian, real quick here,
sure.
In your best opinion, what would you think would make a good podcast versus a bad podcast, generally speaking?
For me, it all boils down to your content. Like I really believe that, you have to continually strive to really put out good quality episodes. I don't mean that just from a sound perspective. Obviously that's important. But it really goes down to like, are you putting out stuff that your audience, that you should know who your audience is, wants to hear? I do a movie review podcast, and I strive every time we record to, make my audience laugh, make them informed, and at the same time, leave it so that, leave them coming back for more. And if you're not doing that, if you're kind of delivering a lackluster episode where you're just like, yeah, I know I have to put one out this week, but no, I'm not going to put the energy into like research. I'm not going to put the energy into like, doing the things that you need to do, like that will read to the audience. And if you're not into it, your audience ain't going to be into it either. Right, so that's my biggest thing is like really,
you got to love it.
You got to love this thing. You got to, I'm 264 episodes in.
You must love it then.
I do love it. There are some weeks, not gonna lie to you, where I am kind of like, ugh. But at the same time, like I'll have people who've reached out to me and they're like, hey, I've been re-listening to your back catalog. It happened to me recently where I just created a Discord channel for my podcast. My podcast is called The Cinema Psycho Show. I probably should have mentioned that. And I'm trying to do Discord to get more like audience interaction. And I had a person who reached out and they're like, I've been a fan of your show since episode 1. And I just got done listening to it again. Like listen to your back catalog again. I'm like, you listen to 260 some odd episodes? They're like, yes, it's great. And like when you hear that stuff, it powers you up to keep going.
It does, doesn't it?
But you only get that if you're in it. If you're in it to deliver that. Because that's going to be the thing that inspires those fans to really reach out to you and really like grab hold of it. So that's my 2 cents on it.
Well said, Brian. I appreciate that, man. So where can everybody find out all about you and all your wonderful stuff?
So obviously Libsyn, if you go to our Libsyn channel, subscribe to it. There's new content coming out every week now, especially new live events and things like that. For me personally, I'm on @Brian Cottington on Twitter. I'm not on it as often as I should. But you can find me directly there. If you want to, chat about podcasting or audio stuff, I'm all about that. My show, The Cinema Psycho Show, is everywhere. It is a movie review / comedy show. So it's know that going in.
Gotcha.
I call it like a vulgar comedy podcast about movies.
Okay.
So it's that type of show. It's clearly explicit. I'm cool with that. But that show is everywhere. You look it up, or we're all over the place on all the different podcast directories. Website cinemapsychoshow.com. At Psycho Show pretty much on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. We are on TikTok, trying to master that for my Gen Z audience that's somewhere there.
Yeah, well,
So-
I'm sure they'll love you too.
Yeah. So that's where you can find us at.
Oh, fantastic, Brian. Well, I want to say thank you so much for showing up here on Podtastic Audio on the big 100th episode of your Podtastic Audio.
Honored. It's been a hell of a time.
Oh, it's been great, man. You have a great, fantastic rest of your week, man.
You too.
Hey, thank you once again for listening to this episode today. I really, really appreciate it. That makes me smile so much. But you know what would make me very happy is if you gave me a honest review on your favorite podcast player, whether that's Apple, Spotify, Joe Blow's House of Podcasts. I don't know which one you use, but if you could give me an honest review about the show that I've created to help you, that would be awesome. Thank you so much. And I will catch you on the next episode.